Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live, where web video meets the issues. As the stakes get higher on the road to Super Tuesday, we will keep following the presidential race tonight as it appears on the internet with techpresident.com, plus media critic Jay Rosen on corporate journalism versus citizen journalism on the campaign trail, and we'll dive deep into one issue, education.
And we need second chance schools because in so many places in America, we still have two public school systems. I mean, I would never have been able to do what I've done in this country had I not had a great public school education.
First, here are this week's online video picks. Again this week, all campaign related, and coming to us via techpresident.com contributor Joshua Levy. Pick number one from slate.com, Hillary's Inner Tracy Flick. Do you know that Reese Witherspoon character from the movie Election? Watch.
How was that?
No, it's just a little higher. A little higher.
Is this okay?
Eric, you can't put tape on the outside of the poster. It goes on the back of the poster. You better just take the whole thing down and redo it.
He was no competition for me. It was like apples and oranges. I had to work a little harder, that's all.
It is about working hard.
You see, I believe in the voters. They understand that elections aren't just popularity contests.
And some people think elections are a game. They think it's like who's up or who's down.
They know this country was built by people just like me, who work very hard and don't have everything handed to them on a silver spoon.
But some of us are right and some of us are wrong. Some of us are ready and some of us are not. Some of us know what we will do on day one, and some of us haven't really thought that through enough.
No, they don't ever have to work for anything. They think they can just all of a sudden one day out of the blue waltz right in with no qualifications whatsoever and try to take away what other people have worked for very, very hard their entire lives.
I'm not just running on a promise of change. I'm running on 35 years of change.
No, didn't bother me at all.
We are all witnessing Election, the sequel, right? Now, raise your hands. How many of you actually knew a Hillary Clinton in high school? Video pick number two. If you saw Monday night's debate, you saw Clinton go after Obama for allegedly praising Ronald Reagan. But they didn't show the actual interview clip that she was referring to. We will show it to you now. Barack Obama responding to a reporter's question in Reno, Nevada last week.
I don't want to present myself as some sort of singular figure. I think part of what's different are the times. I do think that, for example, the 1980 election was different. I mean, I think Ronald Reagan changed the trajectory of America in a way that, you know, Richard Nixon did not, and in a way that Bill Clinton did not. He put us on a fundamentally different path because the country was ready for it. I think they felt like, you know, with all the excesses of the 60s and the 70s and, you know, government had grown and grown, but there wasn't much sense of accountability in terms of how it was operating. And I think, you know, people just he tapped into what people were already feeling, which is we want clarity, we want optimism, we want, you know, a return to that sense of dynamism and you know, entrepreneurship that had been missing.
So is Barack a closet Reaganite, or was Hillary stretching the meaning of that clip to make him look like he's a double agent? We screen video, you decide. Video pick number three. Liberal comedians just can't stop themselves from making fun of Mitt Romney. This piece by Andy Cobbin is called Mitten Strikes Back. Why Mitten? Just look at the map.
Throughout history, Michigan got screwed. From the glaciers to the Treaty of Ghent to globalization, outside forces have written Michigan's history for her. January 15th, America's mitten can hit back. Mitt Romney is the kind of candidate Michigan Democrats need right now. He's a rich man who will spend millions of his own money on attack ads.
McCain supported this year's amnesty bill.
1,033 pardons and commutations.
There is no greater voice against the Republican candidates than this Republican candidate. If he loses Michigan, he may be done. Michigan, do you want this primary season to be over, or do you want this primary season to be hilarious? If you can't see yourself voting for Romney in 08, pick a different Romney. Think of Romney from 94.
I will preserve and protect a woman's right to choose.
Romney in 02.
We do have tough gun laws in Massachusetts. I support them.
Or Romney in 06.
My pleasure to introduce my collaborator and friend, Senator Edward Kennedy. Senator?
Catch this guy on the right day, and he's Che frickin' Guevara. But best of all, he's rich, desperate, and lashing out like a drunken frat boy. Michigan, you can keep this circular firing squad of jerkos alive. Democrats vote Romney on the 15th. They may call it underhanded, but it's time for America's mitten to take off the gloves. I'm some dude you've never heard of, and I approve this message.
Andy Cobbin and other dudes you never heard of are just going to keep having fun with this guy. But in this year of the imperfect Republicans, Ted Kennedy's friend and collaborator, as he called himself, just might get the nomination anyway. Video pick number 4 from Tea Time Now on YouTube. Someone caught a pro-Huckabee support group doing a push poll. That's a fake telephone poll that's really a way of spreading disinformation about one of your opponents. Watch this and listen carefully.
On the issue of taxes, do you want your taxes not raised and if possible cut?
Yes.
Does the fact that former Senator Fred Thompson refuses to sign the No New Tax Pledge, that is a written promise not to raise taxes as president, and that Governor Huckabee has signed the No New Taxes Pledge not to raise taxes as president, supported the Bush tax cuts, and is proposing a fair tax reform that eliminates the IRS altogether, make you more likely to trust Governor Huckabee on the issue of tax relief?
No.
Do you have a favorable opinion of Senator Lindsey Graham?
No.
Are you male?
Yes.
Are you 50 years of age or older?
No.
Thank you for your time and views. Goodbye. This survey was paid for by Common Sense Issues and not authorized by or coordinated with any candidate or campaign committee. 719-306-2543.
And there's a caller ID on it. Herndon, Virginia, 703-961. 1077, 116, 9:51 a.m. I just got push polled by somebody supporting Mike Huckabee against Fred Thompson. Interesting.
Interesting. So we learned from that Huckabee supporters consider Thompson a rival for evangelical votes, right? Since Thompson dropped out yesterday, that could be good news for Huckabee going forward, except Huckabee's running out of money, so Mitten is looking better and better. Can't we just go right to the Romney-McCain final round? And video pick number 5, it's for Martin Luther King's birthday, not a campaign clip. This is a clip of Dr. King you just don't see very often. He was once asked about Malcolm X. At the time, Martin was considered the Southern civil rights activist of love, and Malcolm the steel-eyed Northern militant.
Malcolm X, one of the most articulate exponents of the black Muslim philosophy, has said of your movement and your philosophy that it plays into the hands of the white oppressors, that they are happy to hear you talk about love for the oppressor because this disarms the Negro and fits into the stereotype of the Negro as a meek, turning the other cheek sort of creature. Would you care to comment on Mr. X's beliefs?
Well, I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. This is what I try to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadened complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner.
Those are this week's online video picks. This is Brian Lehrer Live, where web video meets the issues. Tonight, week number 2 of our 4-week partnership with TechPresident.com. This week, the expanding role of technology in the political process and an insider's perspective on just how the Internet is transforming political fundraising. With us now are Andrew Roche, a co-founder of TechPresident.com, and Michael Lux, who founded the grassroots site Open Left. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in. So, Michael, you were just saying before we went on the air that many people consider the Internet kind of its own department in the media, but you say it's not like that, it's more like electricity. Explain that.
Well, a lot of traditional campaign people that I talk to, people my age and older, tend to view the Internet as its own little department. You know, you put boxes on the charts, and you've got a box for the person who does opposition research, and you have a box for the person who does fundraising, you have a box for the person who does the spokesperson job.
This is from the campaign's perspective.
From the campaign's perspective, and they put Internet in one of those boxes. I always suggest to people that they should think of it more as the electrical pulse that actually animates and drives the entire campaign, that's how you ought to think about your Internet.
So what does that mean? I mean, that's kind of abstract. So how does that actually play into all those other campaign functions you were talking about?
Well, the Internet has the capacity to help your field organizing, because you can gather email addresses. You can also gather, for that matter, other kinds of information over the Internet from people, and you can organize people as a traditional old-school field organizer would. It drives your media because you get your information from the Internet. Your opposition researchers use the Internet to get the information they're looking for, but then it's a feeding out mechanism where you push out your message to your supporters, you push out your message to reporters, you push out your message to opinion leaders, to organizational leaders. So it serves multiple communications functions. It serves a fundraising function. We all know about Howard Dean and Barack Obama and all of those folks who've raised a lot of money over the Internet. Ron Paul. So it drives your fundraising and animates your fundraising. And so basically each thing a campaign does, it helps animate. Even TV ads. Campaigns now more and more are putting their TV ads up on their websites, either first to give their supporters a kind of teaser opening, or as they're putting up their TV ads, they email it out to all of their all the people they want to see it.
And hoping they will catch fire and be passed around and become kind of a hit. It's always been amazing to me that people watch any kind of advertising voluntarily on YouTube or elsewhere online, but they do. There are commercials, campaign or otherwise, that become hits on the web. Andrew, it's great to be working with you and Tech President for these 4 weeks, all the way through the day after Super Tuesday, Super Duper Tuesday, Tsunami Tuesday, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious Tuesday. People are calling it all kinds of things, with 22 states voting. And all those 5 videos that we just played came from your collection of sort of what's hot in the web video campaign world right now. What function do you think videos like those play in our democracy?
Well, they're changing the entire ecology of politics, because now anybody who would normally have a political opinion that would be passed around a dinner table or around a water cooler or maybe over the back fence, as it would have been in the 20th century political world, can now do it online and in effect have so much more reach and so much more of a voice in the process. And so the political dynamics are changing much more into the hands of the voter than from the top-down political system that we're used to.
Do you think, for example, the mashup we saw, video 1, of the Reese Witherspoon character from that movie Election, and for people who don't know the movie, those were scenes from a film, and Reese Witherspoon was playing this kind of Hillary Clinton, you know, high school character, mashed up with actual recent news clips from the campaign. Is it just comedy? Is it just somebody trying to launch a comedy production career? Or does it also say something to somebody that might have an effect?
Well, you know, maybe not individually, but maybe cumulatively it does. So if you remember the 1984 Apple ad mashup of Hillary Clinton sort of acting as big sister, it probably at that time didn't really change anybody's mind about Hillary Clinton or about Barack Obama.
Right, it was not in 1984. We played that clip. That was just from this year, last year, but referencing a 1984 Apple ad showing a kind of Big Brother 1984 type character.
And replacing
Hillary was cast in that
role. Right. And so among internet netizens, it was sort of, oh, we agree with this because we thought that Hillary's offered to have a conversation with the American public when she announced herself on the internet running for president was disingenuous because there really wasn't an opportunity to have that conversation. There was no back and forth. It was all top down. So it resonated, but did it really change anyone's opinion? Probably not. But if there was a whole series of videos produced by voters that constantly cast Hillary Clinton as mercurial, as being power hungry, as being focused to the point of potentially dangerous, then it might have some effect. But I think that the more important thing is not the videos that get the 100,000 views or the 500,000 views that really are the most important. It's the little ones. It's the video of just a little clip of Rudy Giuliani saying something that was that might resonate with somebody negatively, sent to 10 friends.
Right, or that piece of Mitt Romney calling Ted Kennedy his collaborator and friend, tucked into that satirical video, but that jumps out at you, especially if you're conservative.
Right. So, Brian, if I told you to go see the movie Juno, and I said it's really great, it's funny, you'll be moved by it, you know, we're friends, you'll probably go. Most likely. More likely because I recommended it than if you saw the review.
Good soundtrack.
Great soundtrack. And probably more likely than if you saw the ad. Same thing in politics.
Yep.
And so the power of individuals to actually change and influence the opinion of their friends is still very important in politics, but the tools that are available to those people are far more powerful, and that's why video is a very important tool.
Are you at Open Left looking at how fundraising is being changed by the internet? This is one of your main things, right?
We're looking at how everything is being changed, and
talk about the fundraising.
The fundraising specifically, I mean, the opinion leader thing is critical because the reason people give is because people that they respect ask them to give most of the time. Sometimes it's a famous person. You know, you get an email from Paul Newman for an environmental cause, and you think, Paul Newman's a pretty cool guy. I've always liked him. But a lot of the times, and in fact most of the time on the internet, it's someone that you know.
It's peer-to-peer.
It's peer-to-peer. And the things that have spread like wildfire have mostly spread like wildfire because it's friend-to-friend, peer-to-peer. Opinion leader sends out something to their listserv. That's how Move On started. It started as people forwarding the initial petition about it's time to move on impeachment.
So I've got a question for you. Why is Ron Paul raising so much money online with a relatively small base, and Mike Huckabee doesn't seem to be? Now, Huckabee's at a point in his campaign right now where he's apparently having to bypass Florida, a state he could conceivably compete in because there are a lot of evangelicals in Florida, but he's got no money. And yet, he's not getting this infusion on the web while Ron Paul continues to take in from his probably much smaller base.
Well, I think part of it is demographics. You know, the kind of people who are likely to give money on the web or likely to sign petitions, likely to do anything on the internet, they tend to line up in certain demographics more than others. Even today, you know, obviously.
Because I would think that evangelicals, and I don't really know one way or the other, but I would think that evangelicals are one of those communities where, you know, the kind of really committed evangelical Christian that tends to vote for Mike Huckabee, that cares about the religious beliefs of the candidates, would have an online community, would be passing a lot of stuff around online, would now be saying to each other, Huckabee needs help, and start raising a lot of money, but it's not happening.
They do have an online community, but historically, they haven't. At least I haven't seen evidence of it yet. They haven't tended to give online as much as the libertarian community, which loves Ron Paul. They're very used to going out and raising money online and networking online.
You want to get in on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's one other major factor with Ron Paul, which I think can't be dismissed, which is that he actually went to his supporters and said, I don't know how to do this. You know how to do it better than me.
Absolutely.
And more
humility.
Humility. He basically, you know, first of all, he had a great message for a lot of people who are libertarians. Let's abolish the IRS. Let's get rid of the CIA. Let's get rid of the FBI. and let's get out of Iraq.
Howard Dean did the same thing 4 years ago with Joe Trippi.
Right, and so...
He didn't know, but he had this guy who knew.
Well, he had a lot of young people who were in Burlington when people were arriving in Burlington after hearing about this guy who said George Bush was wrong, said, hey, I want to build a blog for Peoria, Illinois, or Punk Rockers.
And his campaign was all about empowering those people.
That was the message But the key thing about Dean's campaign or Barack's campaign or Ron Paul's campaign is that money is the byproduct of a community that has been empowered by and recognized by the candidate as being smarter than they are. And more importantly, with Ron Paul, in this particular cycle, they've created a very powerful feedback loop where they actually expose the data about the donations as it's coming in real time. Yeah. Normally, that data comes in, it goes into a data bank, it gets submitted to the Federal Election Commission, and we don't see it until after a quarter. This information is happening in real time. That feedback loop is like the Dean Bat, if you remember the Dean Bat, on steroids.
Well, and I do think the nature of the community is critical because the fundamentalist church tends to be, the evangelical church tends to be a very top-down kind of operation. You do whatever the preacher says.
And maybe they're already tithing to the church, giving so many dollars to the church. Some of these folks that, they don't have much left for the political process.
But I think it's more about the nature of
I heard something about
culture.
The Ron Paul donor community. I don't know if it's true, but that maybe a frighteningly large percentage, though probably, I'm sure a minority, are white supremacists who like his stand on the civil rights laws, which is that the government shouldn't be telling you who you can hire and who you can rent to and things like that. You know anything about that?
Not specifically, but I'm not surprised. I mean, libertarian streaks run in all kinds of places in our society, and I'm sure that that's one of them as well.
Before you go,
there is quite a bit of evidence that some of the racist websites are doing a lot of fundraising for Paul, though. So I think there is something to that.
Really. You ran for New York City Public Advocate for the Democratic nomination last time around. Some people may remember on the platform, among other things, of universal free Wi-Fi. Right, internet access, wireless internet access around the city. You're obviously committed to what technology can do for democracy, and you've been talking about some of it now. Is there any downside this year that you've been able to see in this campaign? Like some people say, the web pushes folks more into polarization. We go on to blogs and other things that are only from people we tend to agree with. Are you ambivalent about it?
No, not at all. I actually think it makes democracy far more robust. It brings more people into the process. It certainly reaches young people in a medium that they themselves understand and they themselves create. And I think the upside is that you're going to have the largest election turnout in U.S. history on a percentage basis than you've ever had before. And I think it is a direct result of the fact that the internet is part of the political fabric. It's not just this thing that only young people use or people who are online use.
Somebody told me the average blogger, contrary to popular belief, is a middle-aged white male.
I thought it was a dog.
You can be anything you want on the internet.
Exactly.
Andrew Michael, thank you very much, and we'll do more with Tech President on next week's show. This is Brian Lehrer Live, where web video meets the issues. Something we've been talking about, spark a question or comment, want more information on a guest? Well, we have a blog. To go further into the discussion tonight, visit CUNY.TV and click on the link Discuss the Show on our page. Now let's see what else is happening in the presidential race online. MTV has a political presence again this year on cable TV and on the web. We will talk to one of their reporters. First, here's a clip from an MTV video blogger who goes by Citizen N.
Hola, yo soy Neswa, and I'm representing the state of Oregon for MTV Night's Choose or Lose Street Team 08. Today I'm here to talk to you, the youth. But unlike some people in your life, I'm not here to tell you what to see or say or think or do. No, I'm here to ask what you want to do, what you have to say, what you see going on, and what you want to change. When I was younger, I looked at the world around me and I had a lot to say. And I felt like nobody wanted to hear it. And too often, I was right. We're going to make them hear you. So take advantage of my big mouth and my camera kung fu. Let's make the world listen. Let's not take no for an answer. Let's speak up strong and loud and proud. Let's change the world. or run out of batteries trying. Watch this space. Next up, your thoughts, your issues, your voice, your face. This is Neswa, reporting from Oregon for Choose or Lose Street Team 08.
An example of citizen journalism there on the website of MTV. Now, if you're dissatisfied with the mainstream media coverage of the presidential election, you're hardly alone. There has been plenty of criticism, especially of the media's focus on the horse race instead of the issues. But there's a new approach to covering the race. You might have heard it called citizen journalism, crowdsourcing, networked journalism, or even pro-am, as in professional amateur. And it's another and sometimes better way to report on politics. And the 2008 MTV Choose or Lose Street Team, the largest citizen journalism venture to date, is launching this month. So with me tonight, it is a pleasure to have media critic and NYU journalism professor Jay Rosen and the New York correspondent for MTV's Street Team 08, Sarah Benincasa. Welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Sarah, tell us about the MTV project. You're not a journalist in real life, but now you're going to play one on TV?
I'm a stand-up comic in real life.
Uh-oh.
With a day job as a journalist. And now I have this extra amazing gig with MTV. It's very exciting. It's a partnership between the Knight Foundation, MTV, the Associated Press, and Adobe Youth Voices, which is Adobe's charitable arm.
Now, Jay, you're one of the gurus of the emerging citizen journalism, especially online citizen journalism movement, and in the way that kind of regular media organizations partner with citizens. That's the pro-am part. But MTV is corporate media. Can they do something that counts to you as citizen journalism?
If they have an idea, they can. I spoke to the street team. Talk to the young people that they recruited. And what's different about it, what's interesting about it, is that they're giving them a platform, they're giving them tools, they're giving them training, and they've selected a diverse, interesting, unusual group of people, but they are not telling them what to do. And so immediately that's a different kind of editorial organization because it's going to be much more driven by the contributors.
Not telling them what to do. How does that work?
Well, pretty much, other than adhering to normal practices in terms of things like not depicting gratuitous violence, they really have sort of given us the keys to the kingdom in a sense. And Jay came in and spoke to us and sort of riled us up and was like, go out there and do good work, and sort of told us to go wild. And actually...
So wait a minute, why is this a good thing? If you're somebody without journalism training, and, excuse me, somebody gives you a camera and says, okay, now go cover the presidential race. You don't have journalism training. I'm guessing you weren't a political science major. I'm guessing you haven't been, you know, obsessively following politics for years. Maybe you have.
I have. I'm a nerd.
You have.
I'm sorry. It's true.
So
Not
that's why you got this gig?
Well, I think that everyone who got the gig has, I mean, for example, Chantel Middleton, who's our representative down in South Carolina, works for, I think it's the ABC affiliate down there. She's a reporter. Whereas someone like Neswa, who you just saw, is out in Oregon, and he does a lot of journalism and commentary on his own. Everybody has, everyone selected for this in some way is a storyteller, a nonfiction storyteller. Not everyone went to J school. I didn't.
So what are you going to do with all this freedom?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm interested in telling stories, and the reason they've deployed us is to tell stories that won't necessarily get told on bigger screens. Perhaps Hillary Clinton would be excited to talk to someone for MTV News, you know, on the big screen on TV, but maybe I can talk to a single mother, or I recently talked to an interracial couple in Brooklyn who are
You know, we have a clip of that, so why don't we show that right now? Because if this is the year of Barack Obama, biracial candidate, here is part of Sarah Benincasa's interview with a biracial couple about their view of the political scene.
Nobody really seems all that attractive to me out of either party, and I don't know if that's a good place to be. I'm just kind of waiting to see who will be nominated, to see what will what will fall from there. Like, I like certain things about certain candidates. There's certain things about Barack Obama I find very interesting. There's certain things, like, on the other side that I find interesting about Huckabee. But then there's weird stuff that pop out of, like, every candidate where I'm like, oh, I don't know that I like that, or that's kind of weird, or not necessarily what I agree with. There's some people that I can kind of immediately discount. Like Kucinich, I don't think that anybody, I don't have to even think about what his platform is, because he believes in aliens, and that's...
And yet I took one of those online quizzes where it's just like, fill in where you stand on certain issues, and apparently Dennis Kucinich rated the top at the highest rank. Like, that's who you would be voting for, theoretically, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, so she believes in aliens. That was the #1 question and the only question.
I don't have to question it anymore. I believe in aliens.
Yeah. I took the same quiz, and Barack Obama ended up being first. And then I don't remember who was like the second. I don't know if it was... I'm pretty sure that really low on the list was Hillary Clinton. And that's only two I remember off the top of my head. Also, Giuliani was really low on my list.
For what it's worth, I think that people should educate themselves on all the candidates, because I definitely don't.
So you're right. We're not going to see that on the CBS Evening News.
Right.
But it has value to democracy because...
Well, because, I mean, they're figuring it out. Abby and Luke are young people. They're in love.
Super voter.
Exactly. Luke is super voter. They're figuring out how, and in the larger context of the video and the interview, you come to see that they're figuring it out in context of both their religious beliefs. They're both practicing Christians, and also how they relate to one another. Abby is biracial and Luke is white, and so the whole interview goes into all those different things, them just figuring out as young people what they believe in.
Jay, you have a citizen journalism project called newassignment.net. And Assignment Zero was the first, something you called Assignment Zero was the first thing that you did with Citizens and with Wired magazine. And you've been quoted saying that was 28% of it worked. It was 28% successful, 28% of it worked. Which 28% was that?
Well, we found lots of people wanted to help us investigate our story. So I thought we'd get 200 and 300 people participating. We ended up with over 1,000. That was successful. People did understand the idea of breaking a big story up into little parts and doing them. And if we could do that effectively and put it all back together again, it would work. People got that. So that was successful.
And what was the other 72%?
Well, we didn't exactly know how to divide the story in a way that people would pick it up and do it effectively. It wasn't until we asked people to each do one interview with somebody critical to our story, an email interview or phone interview, that they could kind of get their mind around that task and did it. And they all did do that.
So a great deal of freedom, but a little professional direction.
Oh, I think a lot of professional direction is sometimes needed. I think we don't know yet exactly how to tap the distributed labor of lots of people, but we know it's possible. It's just a new area of practice that we have to figure out the forms for.
And it's new, and as you know, I've been experimenting with it
some
on my radio show on WNYC.
What have you learned?
Well, I'll tell you one story, and this is a way that it is still experimental. We did what we call a crowdsourcing project. It's like outsourcing, but to the crowd, to the whole audience out there, asking people, well, this one was called Are You Being Gouged? And we just asked people to go to any store near them and get the price of 3 common items: a head of iceberg lettuce, a 6-pack of, I think it was Budweiser, and a quart of whole milk. Just 3 very common, ordinary items, to see how much price differential there was from store to store or neighborhood to neighborhood in the New York City area. And we were going to put on the air, the ones that were the highest price, as well as the bargains. But we were ready to be outraged about these, $15 6-packs and all of that stuff, until we did a little fact-checking and discovered that most of those outliers at the top, the outrageously priced things, were not the real prices. So, yeah, we had hundreds of people contribute, but then, because they weren't professional journalists with professional vetting operations, we had to do some of that ourselves, and we almost put misleading information on the air.
Well, that's a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Yes.
we should expect that citizen journalism needs controls, like professional journalism needs controls, but we can figure those out. And there's a reason to do this, and the reason is not just it's good to have people participating. It's beyond that. If we can figure out how to use these forms...
Because you can find stuff out.
We can find stuff out that we couldn't know before.
Exactly.
That's the promise here, and that's still the promise, even though every time we try to do it, we run into new problems.
That's your job.
I know.
That's
I'm
your
ready.
assignment. Are you ready?
I'm
You
ready.
accept it?
I'm ready, Brian. I accept it.
Okay.
I'm ready to go.
People will see this not on television, but on the web?
Yeah, it's on think.mtv.com, and also we have a website for mobile media so that people can watch it on their cell phone.
You know what's super cool about this? Instead of taking people out of American life, putting them on the bus, and chaining them to the campaign, what if we just left them where they are? And when the campaign came to them, they can tell us what's going on. That's the idea of the street team. Let's leave people where they are embedded in American life and let them look at the campaign.
Before you go, you wrote a piece recently that was just scathingly critical of the mainstream media's coverage of the campaign.
Yes.
I could do this myself, but what's so bad?
It's mindless horse race journalism, by which I mean it starts with the wrong question. The question they have is, who's going to win? It's not their question to answer. It's the voters. And so if you start with a bad question, you're going to get empty journalism. That's what the piece is about. So I call it the mindless media because it doesn't have a way of changing these routines, which have been criticized for 25 years.
Instead of informing people about the issues so they can determine in a more quality way who's going to win, just say who's up, who's down, what their strategies are.
Not just informing people about the issues, no. Journalists ought to be bringing new knowledge into the campaign and creating discussion that wouldn't happen without them. They should be adding to the system, adding to what the candidates are discussing.
So this is campaign coverage without a brain. Does the internet give the TV campaign coverage more of a brain?
What the internet does is it allows us to create for ourselves what the press won't give us.
Last word?
I mean, I'm really excited to be a part of the program, and I'm particularly interested in talking to a lot of New York City public school children and public school teachers. That's what I'm really passionate about.
We'll be
now
watching.
That I like.
We'll be watching for your stuff online. Thank you very much,
thank
Jay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
And even though the debates haven't dwelled on it, many of the candidates are pretty different on what to do with the No Child Left Behind Act, mend it or end it. Here is a sampling of the Democratic hopefuls talking about education in the Iowa Public Television Des Moines Register debate earlier this month.
I think we ought to have a national teaching university where we attract the smartest, brightest young people in America to this university. It's like the Naval Academy, and we pay for their education, and they go out to the places in America where we so desperately need them. I think that we ought to give bonus incentive pay to teachers who are willing to go to the most difficult places. We need to radically change No Child Left Behind, and if that doesn't work, we should get rid of it. But there are huge changes that are needed in No Child Left Behind. And we need second chance schools because in so many places in America, we still have two public school systems. I mean, I would never have been able to do what I've done in this country had I not had a great public school education.
Not just talking about how great teachers are, but giving them more money and more support. Changing No Child Left Behind so that we're not just teaching to a test and crowding out programs like art and music that are so critical. But you asked earlier about sacrifices that I'll ask from the American people. One of the things that I want to do is get parents re-engaged in instilling a sense of excellence in their children. And I've said this all across the country when I talk to parents about education. Government has to fulfill its obligations to fund education. But parents have to do their job too. We've got to turn off the TV set. We've got to put away the video game, and we have to tell our children that education is not a passive activity. It is something that you have to be actively engaged in. If we encourage that kind of attitude and our whole community is reinforcing it, then I have no doubt that we can compete with anybody in the world.
I know that the president has a certain bully pulpit that can be used on behalf of education to do exactly what Chris and Barack and others have said. I'm privileged to have a family that supported me in education. My daughter's here today. Obviously, Bill and I were incredibly focused on her education. So the federal government only pays 10% of the costs of public education. Let's use those dollars strategically. Let's do what we've said we were going to do. How about funding special education, which we never have to the extent that we promised, putting a lot of burdens on states and local districts? How about fully funding whatever we ask the local communities to do? So I want to have a very holistic view of this, because if you go into a classroom today, it doesn't look like the 21st century in most instances. It looks very familiar to me, who was last in a classroom decades ago. We've got to bring it in to the 21st century, and I will use both the bully pulpit and legislative and executive efforts to do that.
And I also want us to think in a bigger way, in a more visionary way, about what we do over the long term to create an infrastructure that allows America's workforce, when they're 30, 35, 40, 45, to continue to be the best educated, most innovative workforce on the planet.
With me now to talk classroom X's and O's is Richard Aram, a professor of education and sociology at NYU, and Luis Reyes, a research fellow at Lehman College in the Bronx. He is a former member of the New York City Board of Education. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So as those clips were rolling, you were telling me, where'd you find that needle in a haystack? The candidates were ever even asked about education in this campaign?
I was saying, I think the remarkable thing about this election cycle is how little education is being talked about. And let me give you an example of that. If you go on the New York Times website to see what the issues are with the presidential candidates, you will find a tab on the economy, a tab on healthcare, a tab on abortion, separate tabs on Iran and Iraq, but not a single mention of education. And so it's not just the candidates aren't talking about it much, the media is not covering it as it should.
And Luis, we saw some wonderful glowing platitudes, mostly, in those clips from the Democratic hopefuls about the importance of education and the goals of education. Are they getting specific to your knowledge? Are we seeing in any way any differences that will help us tease out the candidates' positions? And we know in New York, education is always a number 1, 2, or 3 issue.
It's a top issue where people live and where they go to send their children to school. But it's also a local issue, and it gets defined nationally in the elections as just a Washington issue. So we frame it in terms of no child left behind.
Right.
And for most parents, it's an issue of good preschools. It's an issue of dropouts and middle schools where they're doing so poorly that parents don't feel they have a choice. And so the closest that I've heard is when Edwards talks about the two Americas and poverty and makes the connection between poverty and education. And so the issue is one of vision, not a program. What we'll hear are headlines from them about a particular element of their program, usually around No Child Left Behind. But we don't hear the vision about how education connects to the larger social fabric and connects to economic independence, et cetera.
It sounded from your first answer like you've been looking for this vision. You've been combing their websites. You've been looking at their statements. And you're a professor of both education and sociology.
That's right.
So are you finding it?
I would
and
agree,
is there?
I would agree 100% with Luis Reyes. You can't find it there. What you do find from the Democrats is remarkable agreement that there should be more education, early childhood, more funding for Head Start. Hard to disagree with that. There should be slightly better access to college. Clinton and Obama are both advancing a tax credit to attend college. Edwards has the boldest plan for access to college, the college for everyone, where every American would be entitled to 1 year free education at a public or community college. But none of them are really talking about bold, dramatic steps. And this in a time where we're living in, where many of the Asian countries, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, are far surpassing us in terms of college education. We are no longer have the best higher education system in the country. We have stagnated for 2 decades, and you would expect the Democratic candidates at a minimum to address that stagnation and to put out some bold visions. And frankly, I don't see them.
So let's talk New York education. You're a former member of the New York City Board of Education. You know what I remember from the mayoral campaign of 2001? Now remember, this was right after 9/11, and Ferrer and was it Ferrer that year?
Bloomberg.
Bloomberg and Mark Green were running against each other, and realize it's weeks after 9/11, and the polls come out on what issues people care about, and education was #1. And the media said, no, this can't be true. The polls must be wrong. Terrorism is #1. But I think that really so many more New Yorkers were concerned about bad education ruining their families' futures than they were about that small chance of a catastrophic terrorist attack getting them, that the polls were right. So the concern is there. So then Bush was elected right around then, too. No Child Left Behind came in. What has No Child Left Behind done for or to New York education?
Well, it's focused us on tests. It's focused us on penalties and accountability. It talks about accountability for different segments of the population, but the idea is that if you pay attention to minority subcategories, if you pay attention to special ed and immigrant students by the testing, that will improve education. And the question of sound basic education, equal, adequate education, which was the basis for the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit for 13 years, is put aside in talking just about tests and not about equality of educational opportunity, equality of resources, class size. The chancellor will talk about higher reading scores and math scores in the 4th grade, but will not focus as much on the issue of classrooms and smaller class sizes.
But a lot of the things that you said are laudable goals and perhaps laudable means. So if they're looking specifically at minority students' educational outcome and trying to tease those out and help to bring the test scores up more to parity with white students and measuring schools on that basis, if the schools are being measured on their test scores and the test scores are being broken out not only by how the school as a whole does or by how a city as a whole does, but how the Black and Latino and immigrant students in those neighborhoods are doing, then that gives the institution an incentive to work toward parity. Does it work at all?
It is working at the level that education can make a difference, but what we know is that education alone is not going to make the difference. And so there has to be a connection between social services, health care, jobs and opportunities. And when we don't talk about them together, we get a conversation about tests and accountability and standards. And we will make some nominal changes and increases, and the gap will decrease a bit, but we will not make the kind of revolutionary change to bring these problems to a true education reform.
So who's connecting all those dots?
Well, I mean, I would agree with Luis that No Child Left Behind has things that need to be fixed. I think that most of the candidates would agree as well, but I don't hear specific elements, components, any vision from most of the candidates as to what exactly will be fixed and what would remain.
I think mostly what I do hear when I hear anything is money. Fully fund No Child Left Behind. That seems to be the mantra.
Except, Brian, there is one exception. One candidate does have a vision, says there should be more arts and music, that there's been too much testing, too much standardization. Education and arts have to be spoken together. You know who that candidate is?
Who?
Mike Huckabee. And so what kind of time do we live in that is the candidate that is making these arguments? And the Democrats are silent. We don't hear anything about art. We don't hear anything about music. We don't hear anything about fixing K-12 education in a fundamental way.
So the candidate of homeschooling, who, by the way, also plays bass guitar in a blues band, is also the candidate of public education.
And of abstinence education and of the 10 Commandments in the public schools.
So you take the good with the bad if with Mike Huckabee.
What we should have is, just as the Congressional Black Caucus Institute had a debate, we should have a national debate that's focused on education. And we should hear them questioned.
You know who had a good idea, and I don't think it's going to happen this year, is Newt Gingrich, who said once you have the candidates for the general election, there should be a series of 9 debates by topic, no moderator. The 2 candidates and a major third-party candidate, if there is one, and let them just go. And if you're doing 9 topics, education would be sure to be one of them.
Sounds like a reality show.
Maybe.
For television.
Well, maybe it sounds like an opportunity for real interaction about the issues, but I don't know that we're going to get it this year. But what does John McCain believe in when it comes to education and No Child Left Behind? Here is his answer, speaking to the Des Moines Register editorial board.
No Child Left Behind needs to be fixed, but it was a good beginning. Some of my Republican friends say you ought to just abandon it. Well, I think it was the right beginning. I didn't expect it to be perfect, and we found problems with it, and we ought to fix them. I really believe that we need more choice and more competition in K through 12. And I think our goal in education, our utopian goal, is that a child can go just, a student can go just as far as their ambitions will take them, and they will have access to a quality of education that will allow them to do it. I know that's a rather sweeping statement, but in inner cities in America, in South Phoenix today, people are not receiving the level or quality of education so that their ambitions can take them as far, no matter how hard they study. They don't have the quality teacher, they don't have the quality environment, they are very much disadvantaged compared to my kids who I was able, Cindy and I were able to send to Catholic school.
You reacted to the word choice in that, as that was playing, buzzword for vouchers for private schools. But in the totality of his answer, do you think McCain gets it on some level?
I think he gets it in terms of the problem and understanding that there are inequalities and disadvantages. It's the solution that that he's tied into or handcuffed by, and that's a Republican perspective about choice and the market and competition and privatization, which he shares with other Republican candidates, including Giuliani.
You said it was amazing that the Democratic candidates aren't talking in more detail about education policy. What about the Republican candidates?
I would say they're talking even less. And so if you look at the websites of the Republican candidates, you'll find choice, choice, choice across the board. Huckabee, again, a slight exception, who's been criticized for not pushing choice enough. But clearly, choice policies are not going to be adopted widely in this country, and there's certainly no panacea for American education.
Do you have to give Bush some credit? I mean, when Reagan was in the White House, he was trying to put the Education Department out of business. Didn't he appoint William Bennett, the Education Secretary, with the mission of abolishing the department? But it didn't happen, and Bush came in with this No Child Left Behind agenda that he got through with Ted Kennedy, right? That if it was a bill in Congress, it could have been called Bush-Kennedy.
So let's start right with there. No Child Left Behind was a bipartisan policy, and both Democrats and Republicans today agree that there are problems with it that need to be fixed. That's going to happen, and that's going to happen regardless of who's elected. The legislation is going to be modified. And
do Democrats and Republicans, by and large, agree on how?
On how what exactly needs to be fixed, there is some debate. But both the left and the right around education agree that there are problems with No Child Left Behind that need to be addressed.
You said before that you were disappointed that all the talk about education seems to be left to the local level, and that's one of the reasons the presidential candidates aren't talking about it. But in the videos that we saw, both Hillary Clinton and John McCain mentioned the bully pulpit available to the president. Is that about all the power that a president of the United States has with respect to education, the bully pulpit, or is it more than that?
It's definitely more than that, because we have the Elementary Secondary Education Act, which was the original No Child Left Behind, whose purpose was to equalize education through federal funding, and using the 7-8% of education dollars that the federal government provides to push states and localities to provide equal education opportunity. You have the Special Education Act, IDEA, You have the Bilingual Education Act, all 60s and 70s great society education reform initiatives that came from the federal government. So the federal government can do more than talk, and unfortunately the president hasn't just talked, he's also provided a great opportunity for the privatizers in Reading First and other initiatives under No Child Left Behind to allow the market forces to gain a hold in the schools.
Is it always so bad? I mean, if you have the public education umbrella, and then and I'm not sure what Reading First is, but if you have companies competing to get more effective curricula into the schools or whatever it is it always so bad?
It wouldn't be so bad if the people who were making the choices were nonpartisan, when in fact some of the people who are supporters of the president and had their own products were evaluating other people trying to get the billions of dollars in Reading First monies from the No Child Left Behind.
We're almost out of time. Just give me 15 seconds on if you think the president has more power than the bully pulpit. Anything different?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the federal government has huge power. And so if you look historically, vocational education, in 1917, the GI Bill that expanded access to higher education, throughout history, the federal government is a key actor in pushing educational reform and change.
And you want to give a quick shout out to the Bronx Institute where you work? What do they do?
Well, among the things they do is work with middle school and high school children of color to get them into the pipeline to college, starting in middle schools. And Gear Up is one of those programs that's funded by the federal government and foundations, and we have a wonderful track record.
Thank you both very much. And that's it for tonight's show. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30, and we're available as a podcast at CUNY.TV. Next week, just days before the New York primary, more of the campaign as seen on the web, and we'll have a call-in. And don't forget my daily radio show, 10 o'clock every morning on WNYC Radio, tomorrow morning comparing the candidates' plans for Iraq. That's on 93.9 FM, AM 820, and WNYC.org tomorrow morning at 10. Have a great night.